just because of COVID, 3 miles away from maybe.
Yes.
Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council special meeting of October the 24th, 2023. Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarez? Here. Councilmember Marty Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hamilton?
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Here. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any speaker cards or anybody in the audience that wanted to speak other than what the topic of the study session is?
I do not have any speaker cards.
I'm looking in the room. I think we're good. So with that, we'll move on to item 4, conduct of business.
Item 4A, review and provide direction on Crestmoor multi-use fields draft master plan.
And first, I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Mayor Hamilton.
Thank you. So due to the proximity of the Crestmoor property to my home, I have to recuse myself from this item, so I will step out of the room. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we're on item 4, conduct of business. The item has been read. Now we'll turn it over to the Community Services Director.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of Council. I'm Travis Carlin. I am the Community Services Director for the city. The purpose of this item is to review the preferred plan for the Crestmoor multi-use fields master plan and provide feedback. The next slide, or the first slide. Next slide. The project came to fruition after the school district closed the Crestmoor Peninsula School. The district is in contract for the site to be purchased for a single-family home development. The application includes land dedication for the city for a public park. The city initiated this master planning process, which included stakeholder and community engagement. Calendar and Associates was contracted by the city to develop a multi-use master plan for the area known as Crestmoor Field site. Tonight, Brian Fletcher is here to present the City Council regarding the master plan and work that has been done since the May 9th City Council meeting. I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Brian Fletcher from Calendar Associates at this time.
Let's see if this works. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Brian Fletcher. I'm a principal with Calendar Associates Landscape Architects. It really is a pleasure for me to be before you tonight to go over kind of what we've been working with the community, stakeholders, your commission, as well as yourself through this process. How about next slide? So the agenda for me tonight is to just give you a recap, basic goals and objectives, what the process has been, the preliminary alternatives, namely the feedback that we've received while developing those alternatives, and then to present you with the preferred alternative here tonight. We're super excited about getting the feedback from you tonight so that we can wrap up, make modifications to the plan and wrap it up in the next month or so, hopefully. The map on the right-hand side is just to give a little bit of context. Of course, we're talking about the former Crestmoor Peninsula High School site, and just gives kind of a general context as it's between 280 and 35 and Skyline. Next slide, please. So these were the basic goals that we were charged with at the very beginning of the project and brought forth to every single one of our meetings and such going through. So there had been some work before we got on board. So our process was to build upon that work and continue talking with community and stakeholders to develop a master plan that look to balance the needs of all the community, but do recognize that this has been, the fields, the upper and lower fields had been predominantly used by soccer, and to ensure that the new fields can meet as much as possible the needs of the soccer and other sports groups that have been there. So we also wanted to make sure that we're providing multi-generational uses, make sure that we're sensitive to the adjacent neighbors and neighborhood, and then also make sure that we're developing a project that is that we're cognizant of the costs moving forward. So we are going to be talking about the cost estimate and such, but wanted to make sure that we're developing a park that's in line with other parks of this size and magnitude moving forward, a public facility. So those were the goals that we've brought forth. Next slide. So this is a process diagram. It just shows kind of where we've been, you know, from day one until we are at the council meeting tonight. You know, really what you'll see up there is we've had multiple opportunities to engage the project stakeholders, soccer groups, as well as the private developer. We've had multiple opportunities to then reach out to the greater community. You know, first through pop-up events, through online surveys, and through in-person community open houses. We've met with the Parks and Rec Commission a couple times. We've already met with you as well, and we're meeting here again tonight. So, you know, I feel really good about the public process and the input and the engagement as far as the quantities. You'll see the numbers, you know, that we've been able to engage within this process. Next slide. This is a little bit different of a process diagram. It's talking more about a schedule. And you can see there's 3 concurrent projects going on at the same time concurrently. Up top is the graphic schedule for our park project. In the middle is the graphic schedule for the private development project that's going through its process. And then down below is in orange is the CEQA process. So you can see there's 3 that are concurrent. However, we're going to be very much focused on the park itself tonight. You can see that we started basically at the beginning of the year, and we're here in late October and hoping that we can wrap up a master plan which would guide future development of the project by the end of the year. Next slide. So this is an aerial looking from above, looking down on the site. So you can see this is the former high school campus. Cortland Drive is that drive that's up at the top of the page itself. You can see that the areas that we're looking at, there are the 2 fields, and there's the upper field and the lower field. As part of the development agreement, a portion of this site has been set aside for a public park. And what we wanted to do was make sure that we understand the areas that have been set aside and show it on this. So you can see in a red dashed line where the study area has been for our work itself. So it's all of the lower field, a portion of the upper field, and then areas above Cortland Drive. Next slide. You guys are very much familiar with the site. These are just some site photographs of there. So you can see the first 2 are actually of Cortland Drive. You know, this was taken when there wasn't necessarily cars out there, but if you've been there during soccer events and such, these are the areas off street that people are parking on the dirt for overflow. You can see some opportunity areas in the upper left site. The next 2, 3, and 4 are of the lower fields, and you can see the existing running track. Slide number 5 is showing the transition zone between the upper field and lower field. So there are grade differences that we're going to be having to deal with as the project site gets further developed. And then you can see in the final image on the bottom right is the upper field. Next slide. So for a bit of context, this is the current development plan. So these are single-family homes that are being proposed and going through a separate process. You can see our project area is on the left-hand side. And you can see that same red dashed line that I showed in the aerial is superimposed on this plan as well. I am going to highlight a couple times during this presentation stormwater treatment. So you can see most of the project site is this bright green. However, there's some areas that are, call it a lighter green, or heaven forbid, a seafoam green to get a little fancy. But those are stormwater treatment areas for both the development as well as Cortland, as well as some of the park site. So I'll be talking about those in a bit. Next slide. So After we met with stakeholders, after we did our understanding of what had taken place, we developed 2 preliminary alternatives in order to present to the community. These alternatives illustrated a variety of different field alignments that were discussed with the stakeholders, and we brought this forward to the community to get further input. Next slide. And here's a summary slide of that first kind of initial outreach. Like I said, we feel really happy about the participation. We had 400 people take the survey, as well as in person, probably about 30 plus people came to the open house. So we feel really good about the input that had been provided. You can see the breakdown between preferences and between alternative number 1 and alternative number 2. I think the general consensus with 1 and why people preferred it was a more complete park. And you can see some of the suggested improvements and other feedback that we received at that time that went into development of the next plan. Next slide. So we gathered all that input, met again with the stakeholders with some refined plans, and then presented this plan that you see in front of you. Next slide. Boy, I really wish my text was a little bit bigger. So, do you have, yeah, thanks, Tim. I apologize. Give me 1 second. Next. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. I apologize for the delay. Oops. Damn. Tim? Sorry. One more. Thank you. Yeah. So, how did we modify it? So we heard from several folks, including yourselves, how do we make it more multi-purpose? So we took a look at, could we provide some Little League fields overlaid onto the soccer fields? And truthfully, we weren't able to overlay Little League game type fields. We tried for 2 and we're certainly not able to do 2. So what we did in the preferred alternative, we added a single practice Little League baseball, softball field. And you can see that in the upper right-hand corner of the field itself. A simple backstop, a simple kind of half-circle stripe. This would allow for practice kind of not formalized. This is not a formalized game field, but it could allow for practices, and it could allow for just a family member to come up and be able to pitch and have a backstop to do that. We reconfigured the parking lot slightly. We were able to get a few more parking stalls. We were able to get a nice drop-off zone that's adjacent to the picnic area and the restroom facility. We expanded that restroom and concession building and added maintenance. This is going to be your first public, potentially synthetic field, which you're probably going to want to have space for maintenance, equipment, and such. So we wanted to accommodate that as well. We added bioretention areas. I mentioned those bioretention areas in the upper left-hand corner by that restroom and picnic area. We added retention for the parking lot and some of the park hard surfaces, as well as stormwater treatment, for Cortland Drive as well. We did some adjustments on moving picnic areas to consolidate the turf. We removed the bleachers and added kind of seat wall seating to maximize seating, actually. We increased, based upon feedback, the 11v11 soccer field size by moving the parking lot a little bit, by narrowing down the bioretention area as much as we possibly could. And then we also worked with the sports groups to better understand the offsets that they would like between the fields to narrow those down to the minimum. And all that was to try to get the biggest field possible. And again, feedback, we made some modifications, removed a U12 and added 2 U10s. And then we further developed what was going on along Cortland Drive. Wanted to add fitness clusters, a multi-purpose walking path, and that was added as well. Next slide. I think that was the only one that I'm going to have problems reading. So we brought that back out to the community and such, and this is some of the feedback that we received. We heard about, can you accommodate runners, whether it's through the perimeter pathway or actually changing the color or striping along the actual synthetic turf. Provide more seating, but I'll be talking about that in a little bit. And you can see some of the more important features and design details that will happen kind of later on within the process. Next slide. We brought that concept forward to the commission meeting and had a great turnout and a lot of feedback. There was, and this slide represents the feedback that we heard that night. A lot of talk about concerns for adequate parking. I'm going to talk a little bit more about where we are providing parking. Definitely a strong desire for synthetic turf and lighting in order to maximize the amount of playable hours during the years. And then certainly about questions about funding and where is there funding for this project. And then you can see the public comments and additional requests that were in there. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the themes as we move forward here. Next slide. So I did want to talk about the field dimensions a bit. I talked about how we maximized or lengthened that field between the initial concepts and the preferred concept. There certainly is a desire to continue to try to get that field bigger, and the purpose would be in order to stripe a 9v9 field on top of the 11v11 field. And the reason to get 4 additional yards in there is so we can minimize the amount of additional striping, so you can kind of combine striping. Great idea. The challenge is, we have this pinch point down at the bottom, and we also have certainly a pinch point up at the top with the parking and offsets from the street. We really can't find a feasible way of increasing the size of that field in order to get the desired striping. We still can get the usage, the 9v9, but not the desired striping. Next slide. There was a lot of talk about seating. Is there enough adequate seating? And really, I think that was we did not do our concept justice by explaining what our seating necessarily is. From our concept plans to this concept plan, we actually changed it from bleacher seating to actually a perimeter seat wall, and actually a 2-tiered seat wall. So you can see in the plan view on the left-hand side, the yellow areas. And then you can see on the right hand is a cross-section of what that perimeter pathway looks like. So there's actually a seat wall on both sides of that walkway that does a couple things. It provides seating, but it's also going to help us take up grade between our fields and the upper private development project site. So taking a look at how many seats we could actually get in there, we're actually anticipating 200 people being able to sit within those seat walls. So we think that's a tremendous opportunity. And that's just on those sides. We still have opportunities for seating on more informally on the opposite sides as well. Next slide. I also wanted to show you we've been working really hard to maximize the amount of parking on the site and along Cortland Drive. The goal is to maximize the amount of parking in order to maximize the number of fields that can be played at any one time. So you can see we've color-coded it to help kind of understand where the distribution of the parking is. So we have 37 stalls on site in that parking lot. We have 22 stalls along A Street that's being on the right-hand side. Along Cortland, there's 106 perpendicular stalls as well as 28 parallel stalls within reasonable walking distance of the park site. So with that, we've got an estimated 193 parking stalls in order to maximize the amount of playable fields. Ultimately, beyond this, the leagues will have the leagues can manipulate the amount of parking that is needed based upon scheduling, based upon encouraging carpooling and alternate modes of transportation, only if it becomes an issue. So finally, cost. We ran through the costs again. We presented this last time. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide. The cost went up only slightly from the last time we presented it, and that's basically we are including improvements along Cortland Avenue. So it's the multi-purpose trail, the exercise stations, and a portion of the perpendicular parking stalls that should be associated with the park itself. So right now the estimate includes synthetic turf and lighting. If you wanted to pull that out, it's an estimated savings of $2 to $3 million. And that's all kind of the infrastructure that's required for the lighting and all the stuff associated with the synthetic turf. Our estimate includes costs, contingencies, soft costs, as well. So we try to make an all-inclusive. What the estimate doesn't include is some costs that are being handled by the developer, and that would be demolition and rough grading, as well as the bioretention area for the development portion of it. We also aren't including kind of any maintenance costs that you need to budget long-term, as well as we're not including any inflation. And we know inflation costs have been kind of skyrocketing and such. So, every year, you should anticipate a bit of inflation for these costs to increase, unfortunately. So with that, I'll turn it back to Travis.
So next steps for this project is that we are seeking feedback from the City Council on the finer master plan based on the information that was presented tonight. And then in the first half of 2024, the City Council will be presented with the Crestmoor Development EIR, and we'll take the appropriate action for the master plan after the EIR is adopted, while considering the project budget and schedule in more detail.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the information. Is there any questions from my colleagues on the presentation itself? Not seeing and hearing any at this time. Let's see if there are the members of the public and have them have an opportunity to please speak.
I have 2 speaker cards. The first is Mazen Musala, and the second speaker is Joe Meyer.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Mazen Musalam, and I am the acting president of the San Bruno Low-End Soccer Club. Between San Bruno Soccer Club and AYSO, there's roughly 1,500 players that use Crestmoor as their primary field to play soccer in the fall and in the spring. We are here to support the plan to take the portion of the land that's been granted back to the city and make this a multi-sport complex, primarily focusing on the soccer community. I know there was discussion about putting a backstop for Little League, and with all due respect, there's probably 6 or 7 existing fields that our youth baseball and softball organizations currently use in San Bruno. Crestmoor is primarily for soccer. On occasion, we'll be able to use fields or parkside if they're not being leveraged by the baseball and the softball community. So we encourage you to review this plan and keep in mind the years that we've had all these youth soccer players. It's a sport that continues to grow year in, year out, and we would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Council. My name is Joe Meyer. I'm currently the Field and Safety Director for AYSO Soccer here in San Bruno. I had a couple comments regarding this and wanted to thank Brian for his hard work and doing what he could with the footprint that he was allowed to work within. And that's where one of my first comments is going to be pointed towards. The footprint, it's a reduction in the field space that we currently have from about 300,000 square feet of usable space up there right now. This is grass field space, down to about 150,000. That's a huge reduction. And my point is this good for the city of San Bruno? Do we have to have the 53 houses up there? Why can't it be 140, which then we can increase the size of the footprint? I worked with Brian. We worked for inches. We back and forth, trying to get every square inch we could. There's a 30,000 bioretention area that's in that property that has to be there because of the development. 30,000 square feet could make a huge difference in the usability of that field area, which hopefully you guys can help some way get more square footage for that facility up there. The bioretention area could possibly be put on the east side of Cortland, but it's going to cost more money, which means less money for the developer. You know, is that good for San Bruno? If the developer makes a little bit less money, there's 6 or 8 houses could be put on the east side of Cortland Drive, which would allow the field to be bigger, more space. Is that better for San Bruno? You know, if the houses are relocated to someplace else? These are things that the two projects go together, the private development and these fields. But it seems like the developers had this idea of the divide and conquer. If they separate the two, it's better for them, you know? I'm asking you, what's best for San Bruno? Is this the best plan that we can come up with? With the space that we've allowed to work within, that Brian's had, it's probably a really good idea, you know? But is it really good for San Bruno overall, considering the development, the size of the development, and what the city is getting out of it, what the community is getting, what the next generation is going to get? Because once this is gone, my grandkids, yours, are they going to be able to have that space? No, there's going to be houses on there. Protect the area that we can. What we have up there is vital to San Bruno. It's vital to the community. You know, please consider increasing the area, the footprint, and the usability of that space. Moving that bioretention area is probably one of the easier things to do. Will it cost more? Probably, you know, but it's the future of our next generation. That's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
I have no other speaker cards.
Was there anyone in the audience here that wished to speak that hasn't had an opportunity? Seeing and hearing none, okay. I'm going to bring it back to the council and see if there's any additional comments or questions from my colleagues to staff. If there's not, because they are looking for, okay. Because again, it is not a motion element, but it is, the direction is sought from the city council regarding the final master plan. So just as we know. And thank you, Councilmember Medina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you all for being here. My question relates to where we're at right now, and as we're waiting for the EIR to come back, what can be changed? What options are available for the bioretention area? How is the developer responding to the community's efforts to increase the field size and look at how things could be differently? So that's my first main question. And at some point, the council is going to talk about the cost for this and how we're going to pay for a site that costs up to $9 to $11 million. And I would like to hear staff's commentary on that.
And on the cost, I don't know that staff, I don't know if they're prepared or this was the topic for tonight. So I don't know that. I think your first question is just as far as where we're at and that master plan, and as we're dealing with the EIR, is And again, the question came up about the biotension on the east side or maneuverability of some elements of it. And I think that's the council member's question. Where are we at and to that element? City Attorney, thank you.
Mayor Medina and Councilmember Medina, I can defer to staff to talk about some of the other parts of the plan, but as you will recall, the size of the fields is the result of a settlement agreement with the school district. So changing the size would affect our ability to settle a dispute that arose in, I believe it was early 2022, perhaps late 2021. So that's the answer about, the size and changing the size. It really would be this 6.5 acres unless, to dedicate approximately 6.4 acres of rough graded area for the purpose of the park.
So that's an interesting question, but it's factual. It's been negotiated. It's been settled. And people change their minds. You can attempt to see if they're willing to, if the developer's willing to accommodate the community's request based on the plan that is now in front of us, right? When we agreed to this settlement, we didn't have all the information that we have now. We had a kind of an idea of what this field would kind of look like, but it had to be worked out because none of us on the council have the expertise or knowledge to how best the field could be used for our community. So we don't have anybody from Summerhill Homes here or from the school district, but I think it's a valid question, and I accept your answer. If they were here to be able to ask, then we'd be able to ask, but they aren't. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm accepting that answer because that's what it is. My next part is the cost, because at some point we have to be realistic on, can we build this? And this current cost estimate doesn't include inflation, and construction inflation in California is plus over 5 to closer to 9 to 10%, from my understanding. And I'm getting a nod over here by the person that probably knows the best. So, from 9, that goes up to, 10 to 11, 12, 13. So when will we be able to have additional information to check on the realistic chances of being able to do something with this cost? Like, there's development impact fees, and I just wonder if you can just help us share with the public on what's the path forward to making that determination of what we can afford.
Mr. Mayor, if I can. Councilmember Medina, a master plan is just that. It's just a plan. And obviously, as years go by, when we don't develop it, it's going to age, and the costs will obviously increase. I will say that being mindful of, if you made the footprint larger, the cost would be larger. So I think we should keep that in mind. But back to what's before us, I think we have a rough idea of how we can do this. But again, if the longer we wait to build this out, as Mr. Fletcher has pointed out, at 10%, potentially up to 10% per year, we should anticipate that being a fact. We may start having to reverse value engineer this so that we can still continue to afford it. I think one of the issues is the question isn't can we afford this, the question is can we afford all the other parks projects we have going as well. And it will become a priority of this council, or excuse me, it'll become a request from staff for the council to prioritize which is the most important so we can move forward.
Thank you.
So again, the direction I sought from the city council regarding the final master plan, and I'm hearing, and colleagues correct me, that we're fine with the, regarding the final master plan at this point. And it is a plan, as was stated by the city manager. And I appreciate the city attorney because you're correct. There was that settlement. That was where we had to do it twice, because there was them coming back saying we didn't follow procedure and we had to reinitiate, and it was a back and forth when we're trying to all do the right thing, but we felt we had some ownership, they felt we didn't, and then we minced on words, and then it became about us not following process or procedure, and then we had to redo it again. So that's why I appreciate the attorney as a reminder, and I wanted to follow back. There is a backstory to that too, how we got there. Again, this is not an action item, it's just basically feedback. Is there any other feedback to give to staff at this time? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Considering the price of, or the cost to build the project, is there any grant in place that the staff is looking into to basically support some of this cost?
At this time, there was no grant that we were looking into to support the cost of the project.
But just thinking to the council member's question, could there be that opportunity as we've tried with Florida Lot, or is there opportunities that, we can, what's the old saying? The worst they can do is say no. So why not ask and apply, just as a thought? But I know that's all wishful thinking. But
So if I can, I think as grants come up that could be available to us for this kind of purpose, of course, we would avail ourselves to them. But in the moment, there's no grant on the horizon that we're aware of.
thank you. Councilmember Salazar.
I just wanted to add that in the past, when we've looked at grants, generally they want to look for something that's a shovel-ready project, and approving this plan it puts us on the right footing so that when grants do pop up, we'll be able to grant development. This is a necessary step, but we're probably not going to make much progress until we get past this.
Councilman Medina.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking at sheet 6 from this presentation, and it shows going through mid of 2024. What's going to happen, or it's totally estimated of what's going to happen here, depending on when they start construction. But during all this time, where are the kids going to play? And how long is this going to take, right? So and what's the schedule of events? Like, are they going to build a certain amount of houses and then say, okay, the fields are yours? Or we have to wait for all the houses to be built and then we start? Are we talking 2 years from now? Are we talking 3, 4? Do we have a clue on the time that we could possibly think that we would start? And this is all up in the air, right? Because it's depending on the developer and construction schedules and everything. So I think it's important that we at least kind of attempt to answer what's going to happen, where are the kids going to play, and how long it's going to take.
And I'll just, before staff, is if we go back in time, and the high school district has Crestmoor High, and they wanted Crayon College closed. So I tried to negotiate to give them more time. Then it was we couldn't use the fields, and then that was a negotiation. So, right now I think we have a lot of players in place. So I think it's like that crystal ball is what you're asking, which I don't know how staff can, because it's when it transfers from the school district to the developer, what is their thought? What is their timeline? Do they bring up about liability or concerns? That's why the high school district fenced it off and said we can't have anybody, it's no longer safe. So I know that, Skyline College and now Cappuccino have first-class facilities, that the organization would have to reach out and try to see, can we do something to Monteverdi, which is used but probably gets underutilized because of the configuration and the way it is. So I'm just plating that up because I think it was a lot of moving parts to try to get them in some, shall we say, throw a dart at the board and then, we'll see if it sticks. But anyway, Assistant City Manager?
Yeah, Darcy Smith, Assistant City Manager. So we don't have a crystal ball, but just for the audience, and maybe some people are new, right now the high school district owns the property, and they've entered into a contract with Summerhill Homes to purchase it. So that takes time, and they've been under contract for years. The city is working on processing the applications for the project. That's, as you heard, separate. But I wanted to mention that the city has just released the draft environmental impact report last Friday. I was frantically trying to search. There's an estimate of the construction timeline in that document, but a lot still has to happen. But that document, just for the public's knowledge, is available on our website, and the Planning Division website's also available hard copy at the Library and Community Development Department. And that also covers this project as well. It's a dual project draft EIR that covers the development project and then this Fields project, and probably has a lot more information for those people seeking a lot more details. There's a 45-day public comment period. There will be a planning commission meeting too to accept public comments. And there, again, are details in there about the construction timeline, but first the property has to be officially sold to the developer. Then they have to demolish the buildings. That can take time because older buildings tend to have asbestos and lead, so there's a remediation period. And then they'll go into the rough grading stage, which you heard about. And then through a subdivision map, the city would be offered this dedication of land, which is, again, is a requirement of the settlement agreement that the city entered into with the school district. So it all takes a lot of time. What the city wants to do is get through major milestones. This is one tonight, to get your final feedback on the master plan. And then again, the next milestone will be that project environmental impact report will come back to the city council along with the development project, which it requires discretionary approval. So that's going through, again, a separate public review process. After those approvals are in place, then we'll know this is happening, right? And we'll know a little bit more about the timeline for the property transfer, and then again that offer for dedication. The city would eventually take title to the property, if that makes sense. Right now, the city does not own this property, nor has it been, officially offered to us. We're probably talking about late next year, and as part of the budget process for next fiscal year, which is already underway, we will come to you with a study session to get feedback on this and other projects. As City Manager McIntyre said, there's a lot of different parks projects that the city has been working on, some of them also for years, some of them with master plans. And so we want to get a coordinated set of parks capital projects to you with rough budgets and sometimes more detailed budgets, because some of them are advancing through different stages that are more final, and present that to you at a study session next year so you can look at the comprehensive capital improvement program parks plan. And then we'll know sort of how do we fund this and what's the actual construction, if that makes sense. And then addressing the interim field needs, we will obviously working through that. There's a lot of parallel processes here. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, honestly. So we'll know more when the EIR is complete and then when the application is complete. So at this point, there's a lot of unknowns, and in the next year, coming in budget of next year, we'll kind of have a better clue in June, July.
Well, the budget study sessions are earlier in the year. So then we'll have a better analysis of what funding the city has available,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
Forecast of what the impact fees will be coming in, the future revenue, and then how this is coordinated with our other park projects. But important to note, the city is again running kind of a parallel process. The project is one, the development project is one project moving forward, and then the city master plan is another one. But I want to emphasize, you can't make any financial decisions about the project until the EIR is approved. You can't make any contractual or funding decisions, and also until we actually own the land. So at this point, it's not our land. Remember, it's the high school district land. So they're supportive of us doing this master planning effort, but until the processes are all concluded and the city has offered the land, and as you know, we accept the land, then we own it, then we can ramp up efforts.
Thank you for that. I know there's a lot of moving parts here. So when construction starts and it's determined that soccer won't be played at Crestmoor anymore. What's the plan? What are we working on to, whether it's having the fields at Skyline or wherever else, Monteverde, but there's a lot of players, and it's going to be quite difficult. So how far along have we thought about our options to find space to play, either it's next year or the following year or the next 2 years? How far along are we in that process?
We're not far along at all. So the stakeholders are going to need to work. Right, keep in mind, we're a third party to this. Right now, the relationship is with the soccer players and the high school district. That is the relationship. We're just moving in and we're going to build a new facility, or eventually, hopefully, build a new facility for the stakeholder, the players. I've talked to the superintendent of the San Bruno Park School District about their opportunities to accommodate certain soccer uses in the future, and we'll have to talk to the high school district as well. But I think there needs to be a joining of all the parties here for an understanding of what can occur. Summer Hill will have the right, they will own the property, and they will have the right to do with the property as they wish, meaning they may say, we're not interested in accommodating soccer anymore on an interim basis until we build our field out, which means we will need to find an interim site for soccer playing. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's 2 to 3 years that we'll need to identify interim sites. And I say sites because it may not be a single site. We may have to spread it out. But again, a lot of this has not been thought through yet, to be honest with you.
All right. A lot of uncertainty and unknowns, but that's where we're at. That's how it is right now. So that's the reality we're living in, and getting this approved and going forward, as Councilman Salazar said, is making sure that we have something that's ready, and it's going to be a couple of years at least when that happens. So thank you very much for everyone.
Any other questions or comments, team? Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have one last question. For the 197 parking spaces for the park, is this exclusive only for the purpose of the players and the visitors? Are the residents allowed to park in this area?
I'll take that. Okay. Yeah. Well, so that parking is public parking. So it's just like the parking outside the senior center and the parking on our public streets. It's available to the public, unrestricted. The resident parking, they have 2 garage spaces, 2 driveway spaces, so I think 4 on-site spaces for the residents. And then within the private streets for the development, there is also some street parking. And those streets, again, private streets managed by the HOA, sometimes they have parking restrictions in there. But the Cortland Drive will be public parking. And so that's just, again, like any other parking out there. And no, it won't be metered. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Anything else, Marty? Okay, city manager, city attorney, do we have anything else we need to go over? Okay. Then I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you for the presentation. That will get us to our next step that was asked for and indicated today. And as I said, and as we said, the shovel ready, as Councilmember Salazar said, these are things that they do look, and I don't care if it's in transportation or it's in parks, but it is shovel ready items they want to assure its success and not have dollars tied up. So hopefully that gives an opportunity, but there are no promises. With that, of course, staff and others will be around after we adjourn this meeting, which we will adjourn to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held tonight, October 24th at 7 o'clock. Staff is here to avail themselves if you have any additional questions or comments. With that, we will adjourn this special meeting, and we will reconvene back at 7 o'clock. Meeting adjourned.